For years, we have watched and seen them accomplish wonders. But we have never interfered until now.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to bring you my review of Eternals. The film's about a race of immortal beings, ancient aliens who've been living on planet Earth in secret. So with all these 26 movies and 13 years we've been watching of Marvel, all these things have been going on behind the scenes without us knowing about it. Now, Eternals has a comic history that stretches back to 1976 when they were dreamed up by the amazing Jack Kirby, co-creator of the Avengers Fantastic Four, and as we know, moved to DC Comics to create the New Gods. The movie's directed by Chloe Zhao, who won a pair of Oscars for her nominated film No Man Land. So following the events of Avengers Endgame, an unexpected tragedy forces them out of the shadows to reunite with mankind's most ancient enemy, the Deviants. In the comics, the Celestials rebelled against their creators, but in this movie, we don't really learn anything about their creators. So, Celestials visit planets in what's known as the Celestial Host Experiment, and they judge lower life forms, and they create Eternals and Deviants from selected species. In other words, they made it possible for humans to have the X gene, which created superheroes. In order to create more Celestials and push the boundaries of life in the universe, they seed planets with the Celestial eggs. The emergence of a new Celestial is required in the presence of a large population of sentient beings on the world that they're seeded into. So the Celestials genetically engineered the Deviants to wipe out the planet's apex predators. Instead, what the Deviants were doing was just wiping out all life on the planet. Celestials need the life on the planet in order to enrich the egg. So to figure out how this works is, there are 8 billion people on the planet, and that has happened over centuries, thousands and billions of years. The Celestials grow to a point where they're sort of nearly ready to hatch, because the celestial egg in the planet, Earth, had enriched over 8 billion people, but when Thanos snapped his finger and got rid of half of the population, when the other half was brought back by the Hulk, what that did is infused another 4 billion lives into the celestial body. Now, I know some people might be saying, but they only replaced it. But the fact is, regardless whether there was 8 billion people before and it was cut to 4 billion, the further 4 billion that was brought back had given enough infusement for the resurgence to happen. So in essence, while there's only 8 billion people, the Celestial got 12 billion lives of essence to cause the emergence. Now, due to their biological nature, the Deviants evolved and betrayed their original purpose by hunting and wiping down all life. So as you can guess, the Celestials needed more life to be born, so the Deviants were stopping that process happening. The Celestials then created new synthetic beings, the Eternals, sending them across the cosmos to eradicate the Deviants and protect sentient life on all these planets seeded with Celestials. At the start of the film, you're treated to Marvel's first ever kind of Star Wars crawl, telling us the story leading up to the movies that we've all seen. But the story is a lie, meaning that the whole process is a lie. So you already know a few of the Celestials from Marvel's previous movies. Ison the Searcher was used in the Power Stone as a means to destroy planets. We saw that in Guardians of the Galaxy. Nowhere is a space-borne mining colony, which was actually a severed head of a deceased Celestial, again shown in the movie Guardians of the Galaxy. The Celestial also, from Guardians of the Galaxy, known as Ego the Planet, became aware of his own existence soon after his birth, millions of years ago. So Ego realized that he could manipulate molecules and began creating a planet around himself. After a few millennia, Ego began wondering if there was another life around him. He created a host body for himself and began searching the galaxy before finally finding life itself. He planted seedlings among thousands of planets capable of terraforming them into new extensions of himself, but they could only be activated by the power of a second Celestial. Thus steps in Peter Quill. After Ego had killed Meredith, Peter's mother, he paid Yondu to collect Peter from the planet, but Yondu never delivered the boy. and these events can be seen in Guardians of the Galaxy 2. Quill's celestial powers, including his immortality, seem to have faded in his defeat of Ego the Planet. But this film is about the emergence of Tiamat, celestial that is inside of Earth. Because it's extremely rare for a celestial to be born through sexual reproduction, Peter shows that this isn't always worked because his powers have waned. So even if you do create a human with celestial powers, their power's going to wane anyway, so it's still not going to be the answer to create a new life. Also, can celestials be killed? The answer is yes. They can be killed by the combined might of the Infinity Stones, as demonstrated by an alternate Ultron in the What If series, which you guys can now watch in Disney+. In that series, Ultron used them to kill Ego the Planet, and of course, Cersei in this movie was another reason why we can see Celestials being killed. It's clear in this movie that the new rules have been set by the MCU, which is why I've told people it's a must-see movie. You guys don't just view all of these movies over 13 years and then ignore the whole reason for it when it comes about. So that's why I'm confused why some people actually don't want to see this film or are turning their back on it. This film explains the whole reason for why the Avengers are the Avengers and Spider-Man, and so forth. With the Celestials creating that X gene, that mutant gene, this is the reason why people have superpowers. So for that reason, I strongly recommend that everyone sees it. It's also something new and refreshing, and doesn't undergo the normal Marvel tropes that we're used to in today's movies. Speaking of Marvel tropes, yeah, the lack of villain content is also here with the Deviants, and we didn't really get to spend enough time with them to really care. So the movie only uses them to serve a purpose, which is kind of sad, but they originally were wiped out. As a result of the snap and the blip, the Deviants were able to absorb enough energy to reappear on Earth and begin their conquest to take out humans again. So that's what forces the Eternals to suit up and bring the team back together. The Deviants can slowly assume more of a humanoid form after absorbing life from the Eternals. So let's talk about Thanos, because I know you guys want to talk about that, and I was trolling him the other day. Yes, he's an Eternal, but he's a mutant born with the Deviant gene, which is why he's purple. I joke that Thanos is coming back, but no. His parents were Eternals, designed by the Celestials, meaning that they were synthetic beings engineered by the Celestials. So they could have backup data stored in all of them in the Forge. So that is why the Celestials could view the data recorded from all Eternals on every planet. Thanos doesn't have a backup, yeah? Or does he? We really don't know that yet. So this brings us to explain the ending. With the Earth will be judged by Arishem. He will look into the data from Kingo and Cersei, who we took, and then they'll come back to judge the planet. So this could be the reason for the next big Avengers team-up. But the remaining Eternals who weren't killed are on their spaceship looking for more of their kind to help save their planets against the Celestials. Thena, Druid, and Makari on the Domo will use the mind-link powers to make themselves even stronger against the Celestial if they can find more Eternals. So a few months after they left Earth, we meet up with a surprise visit from Pip the Troll. Those of you know him from the Disney Plus cartoon Silver Surfer, with a pint in his hand, of course. What else? Pip was known for hanging around MCU mainstays like Gamora, Drax the Destroyer, and Thanos, as well as future MCU stars Adam Warlock. So it's good for him to keep around because he drinks and he knows things. Hint, hint. He can also teleport, which is what it looks like he was using, kind of looking like the Asgardian Bifrost technology. But in fact, the reason why he can do this is because in the comics, he had the space gem, the Tesseract, for over a century, and Pip could access virtually incalculable powers from it. But of course, he lost it. However, his long-term exposure to the Tesseract is what's given him the innate ability to teleport. There's also Easter eggs for you guys for hardcore Marvel MCU fans, voiced by Patton Oswalt. You guys know him as Eric Koenig, Sam Koenig, and Billy Koenig from the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. TV series. He's the guy who watches all over the hidden bases around the world, the Level 6 S.H.I.E.L.D. operative that Nick Fury entrusts with his greatest secrets. Pip introduces us to Harry Styles as Eros of Titan, perhaps better known as Star Fox, and to us known as Thanos' brother. He's also not just an Eternal, but in this movie he's an eternal prime host, the same as Cersei or Ajax, and knows where the Celestials are, not to mention the Prime Forge, where all the data is kept. In the comics, some Eternals decided they didn't like this rule against breeding and went out and settled on the moon of Titan, and the rest is history in regards to Thanos and Thanos' parents. So in the MCU, Eternals are pretty different from the comic versions, but essentially, in the comics, most Eternals were prevented from reproducing by their Celestials. So in the movies, they kind of made it that they aren't alive, but are just androids, synthetic androids. However, some Eternals were able to produce children. Thanos' birth was the product of his parents experimenting by mixing Eternal and deviant DNA. And look how that turned out. As you know, Peter Quill, who we just talked about, was also an experiment by Ego the Planet. So in effect, they still can't produce offsprings. Star Fox says, your friends are in big, big, big danger, and I know where to find them. So Star Fox, Pip, Druid, Makari, and Thena are now on that quest to rescue Cersei and Kingo, as well as finding other Celestials and Eternals along the way. And this is what's going to cause a second Eternals movie. But back on Earth, the second post-credit scene shows Kit Harington as Dane Whitmore. And he's really underused in this film. I mean, Cersei, there's supposed to be this love thing going on, but Cersei didn't really want him. Even when he pours his heart out to her, she kind of is like, yeah, okay, huh. And she kind of pawns him off. And that doesn't really tell me that she loves him or has a deep connection to him. But after she gets taken away by Erisham the judge, he kind of makes his mind up to try and go and find her. But before that, halfway through the film, Cersei gives Dane a ring featuring his family crest. It's a crest that dates back to the Middle Ages, and Cersei tells him she found it on eBay. Obviously that was a lie. She was given this ring by his uncle, the original Black Knight. In the comics, Dane is the nephew of Nathan Garrett, who was once known as the villain Black Knight. He wielded the Ebony Blade, which was passed down to him by the ages of his ancestors, Sir Percy, seer to Sir Lancelot, the heroic Black Knight of the days of King Arthur. Percy was the cousin also, guys, of King Arthur, meaning that Dane in this film is related to King Arthur and has his bloodline. Dane is having anxiety over the Ebony Blade because he knows what it can do and has done to his uncle. The Ebony Blade is a kind of a flip on Thor's Mjolnir, in that it doesn't have anything to do with being worthy, but rather it feeds on negative emotions. The Ebony Blade is a sword that grants its wielder the power of the Black Knight. In the comics, it was also used by the Black Panther and Malekith, Thor's enemy. The Ebony Blade is a magical blade forged by Merlin, enchanted to cut through any object, including vibranium or adamantium. It can also deflect magic. And it collects the souls from those it kills. That's why you heard all the whisperings and screamings from the sword as Dane walked up closer to it. So it carries a curse that will slowly corrupt any user and causes a lust for violence, bloodshed and death. According to Null, Merlin lied about his true nature of the Ebony Blade, and it can only be wielded by the impure of heart. So in other words, it's a counterpart to Excalibur. Excalibur, as you know, was a blade of hopefulness and good, whereas this blade and its wielder are linked, and the wielder can be transported to the blade's location too. So Dane would never die when fighting with the blade, given its wielder healing abilities. But Merlin did put some small print on the blade. If used to spill too much blood in evil acts, it will begin to crave blood and induce its wielder to kill even more with a bloodlust. Notice the word evil acts. So where I'm going with this, guys, is that if the blade is used for good, when that happens in the MCU, that might counter its effects and change him from what his uncle was. That for me is the plan. That for me is the get out cause. And that might be the key to Dane becoming good. Only a worthy person can resist it. And Dane Whitmore in the comics once cleansed the blade over the years by casting it into the brazier of truth. So at the end of the film, when we can hear the dead soul screaming from the sword, Dane was about to touch it when he hears a voice saying, "Are you ready for that, Mr. Whitman?" Now, some of you people I've read in the chat thought that this was the Watcher from Marvel What If series.
Ladies and gentlemen, two-time Academy Award winner, Mahershala Ali. Mahershala, it looks like you brought your own hat, Mahershala. You did? What is that? Thank you, Hall H. We'll see you next time. Love you. Thank you. Thank you.
And it's Blade's first appearance in the MCU. Remember, Ali also played Cottonmouth in Netflix's Luke Cage. But he is the arch enemy of Dracula himself, half human, half vampire daywalker who hunts creatures who killed his mother. So this is why it's important to see this film. We are entering the realm of monsters, vampires, and the Weird Nation. And swords are important to Blade. Maybe he's had history with Dane's uncle. We know that Blade has a long lifespan, and he may have come into contact with the mysterious Ebony Blade in the past. I have a theory though. I think that Dane's uncle was maybe the Whistler, yeah? The person who took Blade in when he was young and trained him. That could be the reason why Blade is there. So I'm hoping that that plays out, but remember where you heard it here first. I also have another question. It's not a theory, but could Athena have anything to do with being the Lady of the Lake? After all, the Eternals were in hiding for centuries, and King Arthur threw Excalibur back into the lake to the lady, yet it ends up in Athena's hands. We also know that Makari took many artifacts and gifts throughout her time. Some people just say that she stole them, but she could have also taken the sword into her collection. But I'm looking at it though, the way that Athena picked up Excalibur, I think that she probably was Lady of the Lake. Icarus, by the way, had his ups and downs in the film for me. Now, he's the leader of the Eternals in the comics, who can fly, project cosmic energy beams from his eyes, but he seemed really downgraded here on all accounts. First of all, he wasn't the leader, then he betrays the team. Not to mention his power levels seemed a little bit weak. What worked was the opposing sides of how they can connect to the world, while Icarus is more disconnected given the Eternals' long lifespan, and what he did is what his masters told him to do, which is to get the Earth ready for the emergence. So some might look at Icarus as a villain, but initially he was trying to do what he was told from his masters, which was the right thing. He didn't know that they were lying. And I think the director Chloe Zhao's take on Icarus was obviously influenced by Zack Snyder's interpretation of Superman in the Man of Steel, which is why you hear them talk about the man in the cape with using laser beams, and they even went on to call him Clark, which I thought was really funny. Kingo was the life of the party, the wisecracking smart ass, little bit like John McClane from Die Hard, who's a Bollywood star. And I was hoping for that Bollywood tune to come off a little better than it did, since I enjoy watching Bollywood movies myself, but it felt kind of flat, and being that it was on a movie set made it even more a little bit dry. Now Sprite, an Eternal who can project life like illusions, she kept asking herself why the Celestials made her into a kid. Yeah, you know what? We were asking ourselves the same thing. However, this is kind of like Tinkerbell to us. And Tinkerbell finally got her wish with Cersei's newfound powers. So I like the fact that she ended off the film in the way that she wanted to. And I hope they pay that off down the road, showing her sort of grown up a bit. But the film broke some new elements, as in the first gay hero in Fastos, intelligent weapons and technology inventor, and the first ever deaf hero as well in Makari, an Eternal who can move at superhuman speeds. Druid, I thought Druid was okay, an Eternal who can manipulate the minds of others, and one in the comics who betrayed the team. But here, they clearly took a different path with that, because they probably looked at Netflix series Jupiter Legacy and said, nah, we're not doing that, because it was that type of person who betrayed the team. I think, for me as well, looking at Gilgamesh, I wasn't happy with Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh is the strongest Eternal with a deep connection to Athena. And also, he didn't really come off to me, and a lot of this had to do with the power levels. Remember guys, cosmic energy is the most powerful energy in the universe. And it's the very bonds that makes up the celestial powers, including Ego, the planet, and Galactus. The Silver Surfer also is a cosmic being too, and one of the highest order of power levels. But watching this film, not once did I ever get to see these fighters in that class. Gilgamesh would throw punches at the deviants, and they'd come straight back into the fight. I've seen the Hulk fist punch a Chitauri space dragon ship into the ground in New York. But this guy, whose limits exceed anyone's strength level, which are unknown, his immense superhuman strength makes him physically the strongest of all Eternals on the level of Thanos. And he seemed lightweight to me, much like Icarus. So, and again, like Icarus flying around using his cosmic laser beams over and over again really did any damage. If Superman's using his heat vision and if he's punching stuff, you know you're going to see someone get bust up. But in this film, it just didn't seem that, it seemed lightweight. Yeah, I know a lot of Marvel films kind of power levels don't scale as much as DC movies, but you have to think, these beings are thousands of years old, and they didn't bring it as far as power levels go. So that's one thing that kind of disappointed me in the film. But I have to talk about Athena. They kind of depowered her because of this fragmented mind which Gilgamesh tried to help her with. And this kind of took me out of the movie because in Act 1, Athena could not stop her bloodlust for more than 5 minutes. And then after a while, it totally disappeared. I was like, well, hold on, what's going on? What happened to her bloodlust? Every minute she was turning on the team, trying to attack them. And then when the Deviants attacked in the forest, she goes into La La Land. And in the comic book, fans know this as the Eternal Madness, which causes Eternals to temporarily forget who they are and be overwhelmed by their past memories. So she was the key into understanding them being programmed. What I did like though was after she has some of her mind ripped away from her, it cures her and then she takes out Crow. Now at the end of the film, I'm not even going to talk about Crow and the Deviants because he was totally wasted. Such a waste really. But overall, we get to learn how the MCU was created, which is great. We see the Eternals' journey, which forces them to question their own purpose in the world, which is good again. And some of the action scenes and the abilities were average at best, guys, I have to be honest. Which doesn't define this film. This film is more like Wonder Woman 1984. The film is about human nature to love because the humans can offer so much and the heroes learn that. It has that tonal balance between bland action scenes and gentle humour of the heart. It's an emotional journey into why heroes love humans and why Wonder Woman also did in her movie 1984. And this is something that's missing from superhero movies. Some people say, yeah, there's not a lot of action, didn't like Wonder Woman, and they may not like this. But what you're seeing is another side to comic book movies, which we must see. The genre has to be mixed up like this. In Batman vs Superman and the Justice League, Wonder Woman is shown as a fierce warrior who would kill anybody who stepped within 2 feet of her. But in her solo films, she's wanted to save mankind from its wars, and in its sequel, 1984, save mankind from its own greed. The film puts a firm emphasis on these traits, particularly Diana's impenetrable optimism of what humankind is capable of. In Marvel's Eternals, fans are being shown the same thing, a different side of Marvel's heroes, and it hasn't gone down very well with critics. But for me, I think it's much needed. Otherwise, you're just seeing another Marvel film with another Marvel tone. So at some point, guys, you have to take yourself out of the circle and be open to something new. However, these films maintain the essence of who the heroes are. And if they didn't care, what would they be fighting for? Cersei cares about humans in the same way as Wonder Woman does. The difference is, unlike Wonder Woman who was raised as an Amazonian, Cersei has lived among these humans for much longer. And that adds additional layers to her character, and the reason why Cersei was chosen to be an Eternal Prime by Ajak. In Wonder Woman 84, Gal Gadot didn't get the credit for keeping Diana's character intact while opening her up to more of an emotional side. That's rarely seen and exploited in cinematic screens or TV screens. It's shown in all the comics all the time, and it's also shown in Linda Carter's Wonder Woman series. Eternals does the same job here, but the villains just aren't very good. The real villains are the Celestials, but what they have done for billions of years has worked for them. And in terms of creating Earth as well, that's all come through the same chain. Had they had not wanted to create more of them, there would be no Earth, and only time will tell whether humans will be deemed worthy to live on. So that's it for me, guys. I'm going to give this film a solid 7.9 out of 10. And I definitely advise and recommend you guys to go and see it for the reasons that I've said above. And if it worked for you, great. If it hasn't worked for you, then that's also great. It's subjective and it's down to your opinion, which should always come first. So that's it from me, guys. Let me know what you thought of it in the comment section below, and I'll speak to you guys in the next one. Peace out.